Let's bring in Phyllis Bennis, who's a programme director at the Institute for Policy Studies and the author of Understanding Palestine and Israel. She joins me live from Washington, D.C. Welcome, Phyllis. How do you interpret this situation now? Because it seems that the United States, both Steve Witkoff and President Trump, have really become exasperated with the fact that Hamas are not willing to give up all of the very last few hostages they hold, because Hamas says it wants some kind of long-term guarantees of a permanent ceasefire. Do you see this as a genuine threat that things will actually get worse, if that's possible, or is this just angry rhetoric?
I don't think we know yet. What we do know is that the rhetoric is less important than the actions. And what has been consistent in U.S. actions through this administration, through the last administration, through the earlier Trump administration, and on, has been the provision of virtually unlimited amounts of money and weapons to Israel. Since the genocide began in October of 2023, the U.S. spent almost $18 billion in the first year, and already near $20 billion has been approved for this year in weapons. So the question of what kind of aggressive language we are hearing is, of course, disturbing. The fact that the team was pulled back for so-called consultations is disturbing. Does it mean that there's a major shift underway? Certainly not yet, because there was no change already in the provision of weapons that enable this genocide. The U.S. is a player here, not simply an observer looking for ways to figure out a peace deal. The recognition of Palestine as a state that France is about to carry out in September is important, because France is an important country. It's one of the 5 permanent members of the Security Council. It's a member of the G7, et cetera. But at the end of the day, whether Palestine is an occupied territory or an occupied state, it is still living under occupation, and it is still facing a genocide. And 1/4 of the population has not eaten in several days at this point. So the urgency is what is now as strong or stronger than it has ever been. We're all seeing it on television. So I think that what we have to recognize is that the recognition of statehood is really not the point right now. If France recognizes, it will be the 148th country to recognize Palestine as a state. Palestine recognized Israel as a state back in 1988 in Algiers, when they declared independence and said, we recognize Israel, said the magic words. These are not the important points. The important thing now is there going to be a way to get food into Gaza so that babies are not any longer dying? Somewhere close to 100 of the 122 people who we know of that have died of starvation in recent days have been children and babies. So this is the urgency that we are dealing with. There's a lot to do for the Europeans, but it does not start and end with recognition. It starts with an arms embargo. It starts with implementing the decisions of the International Court of Justice and the General Assembly resolution of July of last year, 1 year ago, that took up all of those calls from the ICJ, the International Court of Justice, that said there should be sanctions, there should be trade sanctions, there should be banking sanctions, there should be an arms embargo. All of this is necessary. We need accountability. We're seeing some of that in Europe right now. We saw the investigation of 2 former Israeli soldiers who had served in Gaza and who had posted on their own social media platforms gleeful approaches of what they had done, potentially war crimes. They were brought in for questioning by the Belgian police. They were not arrested, they were released, but this is an example of what can happen going forward to hold Israel and Israelis accountable. All of the European countries should be preventing the planes with Netanyahu and the former defense minister, both of whom have outstanding warrants against them by the International Criminal Court. They should not be allowed to travel freely through Europe, through other countries. But we're not seeing this action. We're seeing a lot of debate about what's the language and are we going to have new talks.
Phyllis,
that's not unimportant.
You talked there about all the things that need to be done, and not too many people would disagree with you, but they're not happening. And I'd argue that actually on the ground, the reality has only got worse and worse over the course of this conflict. And we just had President Trump essentially endorsing a more aggressive policy against Hamas. If he gives Netanyahu carte blanche to escalate this, what might we see Israel do that is worse than what we're already seeing, which is hard to imagine?
It's hard to imagine, but as we know, every time we think it cannot get worse, it does. It can and it will. They can be dropping more bombs. They can be using more tanks, driving more tanks through the destroyed streets of Gaza and firing more wildly. They can take out all the scraps of food that are left, which is all that's left. There is plenty they could do that will make things worse. What we are talking about is mass slaughter. We've been seeing the beginnings of direct support for ethnic cleansing, as your earlier commentator mentioned. We're talking about a situation where the entire population is being pushed into about 20% of the Gaza Strip, what was already one of the most crowded zones in the world. That's preparatory to mass expulsion. We know that the U.S. is talking to other countries about the possibility of accepting large numbers of Palestinians to be forcibly removed. They will call it voluntary. But when you destroy a territory, when you destroy the hospitals, when you kill the doctors, when you take out all access to food, to water, to medicine, to electricity, to survival, what happens then is not voluntary. We will see all of that. Those are the dangers that we are facing right now. The danger goes far beyond the rhetoric that Trump is using as he gets on his plane to go play golf in Scotland. The danger is what Israel is doing today with US-provided weapons and paid for by the United States. The United States last year paid 40% of the entire military budget of Israel. 40%. We don't do that for any other country in the world. So this is what is already underway, and it can indeed get worse. There are things that European countries can do, including an arms embargo, including actual moves towards accountability, things that Europe is not doing. Europe is now talking a different talk. That's good, but it's not nearly enough.
Phyllis, thank you so much for giving us the benefit of your expertise. Phyllis Bennis is my guest, Programme Director at the Institute for Policy Studies and author of Understanding Palestine and Israel. Thank you.
Thank you.